Hi, if you want to think bigger, you might want to think about Tiger 21. And if you don't know what that is, you're going to find that out today, because we have a book here that talks about thinking bigger and winning strategies for successful entrepreneurs. And we have a man here who's going to help us find out about that. So first of all, I want to introduce you to our guests. First of all, we have Rich Herrig. Rich, thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure.
You're a financial planner. You're also the guru of this group, Tiger 21, in Chicago.
That's correct.
Okay, and Dr. Diane Meyer, who is a local dentist. So thank you for joining us. I'm sure Diane will have some questions for you too. Okay, first of all, tell us what Tiger 21 is. I came to one of your luncheons several years ago. It's very interesting because you had quite a group, a conglomerate of people there that want to join together for what purpose?
To learn from each other. We're a peer-to-peer learning forum, much like Young Presidents Organization, World Presidents Organization, Vistage. These groups are focused, though, on bigger and better businesses. Our group is focused on wealth in the personal context. And we serve as an informal personal board of advisors for one another to help each other make wiser choices with our money, time, and energy.
But you started out as a financial planner already before Tiger 21, right?
That's correct.
So what led you to that?
So I'm credentialed as a financial planner, and I was living in Europe. I lived there 3 times in my adult life. And when I returned after my 3rd sojourn, I had an idea for a different kind of wealth advisor. There were many in my industry well trained and equipped to help the consumers with better financial plans, so cash flows, income statements, planning, insurance, investments, and so on. But I found that nobody was asking the larger, what I call existential questions of wealth, namely, what really do we want this wealth to mean? What do we want it to impact? And if we could leave a legacy of significance, what might that look like? And I found that nobody else was asking these questions. So I was able to trademark a new wealth advisor category called the Legacy Strategist, and that's how I go to market. So
What were you doing in Europe?
So I always thought I wanted to be a Foreign Service officer. So I thought, because our family's so close, before spending a life abroad, I might want to go live abroad. So the first sojourn was as an exchange student in Vienna, and then I returned a few years later, and I worked for Boise Cascade Corporation, and decided I wanted to continue my education. So I enrolled at the university, and I studied history and philosophy. And in order to support myself, I was a tour guide through Austria and Hungary for all the tours promoted in the US by Swissair. And then the 3rd time...
How fun.
Yeah, I can't believe they pay you to do that. The 3rd time was when the Iron Curtain came down. I was sitting in my study in our Evanston home, and it was 5 o'clock on New Year's Eve, 1989, and my wife comes in, and she says, "What's with you?" I was tearing, crying. I said, "The wall, it's coming down." And having been a tour guide through these countries, behind the Iron Curtain, this was more than just a news item for me. And I looked up at my wife and I said, "We're going back." And she said, "Back?"
Was she with you on the first 2 trips? No. Oh.
So I moved the whole family back to Vienna and worked for an insurance company. And so when I returned from that trip, I decided I needed to do something that approached the elation and joy that I felt as I helped people understand the culture, the history, performing arts, fine arts, culinary treats, and so on.
So what languages do you speak?
So I speak German, and I've studied Russian and French, but I wouldn't claim them. I don't speak them well.
Do you write German too?
I do. And it's, I love reading German, and so yes.
And where did you learn that? When you went the first time, or what? Because that's not, German isn't from Vienna, right?
It is.
It is?
Yeah, so Austrian German is about as similar and as different as British English is to American English. And when I worked in the factory for Boise Cascade Corporation, it was the largest corrugated container factory in the country. I learned the dialect, and it was an opportunity that I had to learn the language well, and left that company and enrolled at university.
Was that taught in English or German?
German.
Oh,
It was the University of Vienna.
So
okay,
did
so
your
y-
kids and your wife have to learn German too?
We didn't stay long enough
No.
for my wife, but my children have
Pick it
minds
up.
like sponges. After 6 months, my son was able to speak German.
How old was he?
3.5.
3. Wow.
Yeah,
that's
so
when to
interesting.
get them,
that's
you know.
I know I spoke Czechoslovakian, but my father didn't like it because he was English, so I had to cut that out. So I can understand, well, now I'm not sure because I haven't heard it in a long time, but I could understand it long after that, but couldn't speak it long
Sure.
after that.
sure.
So then you went into financial planning.
When I returned to the States, I had been in financial planning actually prior to that, but when I returned in '94, I started the Legacy Strategist program.
So is that for people who want to build museums to themselves?
No, actually, it's for any of us who want to get on mission for a purpose that resonates deep within them, deep inside, and want to really leave this world different than they found it. At some level, I suppose that's all of us.
Well, hopefully. I would think
Yeah.
that kind of.
Different or better? Or
No, I
both?
think, I mean, to find your purpose and then, you know, be able to
Yeah,
leave a legacy.
right. Better is the implication. That's
So
right.
do you work with one-on-one? You said it's more like a small group. So it's one-on-one, or you get together with this group of 10 to 15 individuals and you kind of brainstorm and, like, say I've got this wonderful idea and I want to create this. I got my passion and, you know, so I'm welcomed into this little circle. So what would you do with me once I'm in this little circle?
Right. So everyone in our group is someone who has a large responsibility. They have created a successful enterprise. Almost all of them have sold that enterprise and now have a stewardship issue before them. So what we do as a group, we have very specific thoughtful exercises we take everyone through. One is called a defense, a portfolio defense.
Okay.
So I'll work with a particular member, one a month, and I'll help them define or update their goals and objectives. And then we'll examine how they're allocated in their portfolio. And I'll ask them, how do these goals and objectives reconcile with these allocations? And often they haven't been so formal in collecting their investments, so they don't. I said, well, let's work on that together. And the exercise that we do one-on-one is something that they'll then present to the group as a whole, and they'll essentially defend why they're invested the way they are, and why it's serving the purposes that they have. And then they open themselves up to the group to think with them about what could be better.
Right.
It's a very
Yeah.
powerful and meaningful growth exercise. And everyone learns. Those who are helping the presenter, because it causes all of us to think a bit differently about our own world, what we're doing, the why behind the what, which is the most powerful part, and then what could be better. And we do this not only for a member's portfolio, but also for their estate plan, for their philanthropy, and we even have a life defense.
A life defense.
A life defense. Now, the life defense, though, is not focused so much on the past and why you did what you did, but more on the future and how you're going to redeem the time and really make it count. So this leads and drives everyone who goes through this to really dig deep for how they want to make the next year's count. And we learn so much about them, and we're given great impetus to think deeply about ourselves too.
So give us some examples of what people have done.
From a life defense standpoint, happy to. So I was working with one member, and he said, well, I'm philanthropic. He had actually asked me to help him think about his estate plan and how he could reduce his exposure to estate taxes. And I said, look, I see that you're very philanthropic. Tell me about that. And so he and his wife shared with me how what they do is impactful, how they like the people that execute in this charitable purpose, and how they share the same values, and how it's really quite meaningful. It adds a dimension to their lives that their other social activities don't do. And I said, well, have you ever thought that you might be able to give more? Does that sound like something you'd want to do? And they said, well, I don't know. And I said, well, why don't has anybody ever measured the magnitude of your surplus income or your surplus assets? And they said, well, we have many advisors, but that's never come up. Well, I said, it doesn't have to change anything, but it might be fun to know. What do you think? They said, okay, let's do it. And so I returned a few weeks later. I did a spreadsheet exercise, and they said, okay, Rick, tell us, can we afford to give more? And I said, well, let's make sure we've got a buffer for all these things that are important that you told me not to overlook for the years ahead. I went through that list, and they said, okay, what's the answer? I said, you can. You can actually give 15 times what you've been giving.
Oh my.
And it won't begin to cost you your lifestyle. And the wife looked at me and she said, you made a mistake.
I would say that too. I'm gonna be like,
she's going
I
to
don't
spend
think
more
so.
money, right?
And I said, well, let's be fair. I do make mistakes. And the husband looked at me and said, Rick, I'm going to work with you to find the mistake in your equations. And he says, honey, would you please give us a little bit of time and I'll call you back once I've corrected Rick's spreadsheet. Well, 2 hours went by, and he called his wife back. He said, Rick didn't make a mistake. And she said, I can no more wrap my head around giving away that kind of money. And I said, well, isn't it good to know it was just an exercise? It doesn't have to mean a thing. She said, oh, yes, right. And then there was silence. And I said, but if you want it to mean something, I have an idea. And the husband looked over at me and went, and I said, well, do you remember when you were telling me about Vietnam? About how the Marines would go in and establish a beachhead, and then once established, they would call in the other armed forces to expand the position? And he said, yes, but so what? I said, there are people living and working in our town, much like Marines, that live in places that you and I don't want to spend a lot of time in, but I think they have something to teach us. Would you like to go meet one? What are you asking us to do? I said, I'd like to take you into the inner city to visit those who are engaged in important work. And we did that. And it was so profound for them that they increased their giving 400%, and they decided that there couldn't be a better way to spend their senior years than giving it all away, and now they've committed to dying broke.
So what did they really do in the inner city? I mean, what
Sure.
topic did they go?
Well, this gets into many interesting areas. So one
Because
of
I
the,
lived in the inner city when I went to school.
then you can
in the
comment on
dorm.
this.
I can comment is right.
All right. So they went into a community in our town where absentee landlords are not doing the local community much good. They don't maintain these residences, and a vibrant community doesn't really grow. And so they asked us to create a fund so that as these properties would come on the market, We could buy them, rehab them, and this community center would find local residents who could, with appropriate financing, acquire these homes and establish themselves in a place that they could call their own. That was one of the activities. And with the lessons that this community center had proven out, there was an interest from other parts of the country. So they created a website and helped them with their annual conference for a more efficient way to register attendees and to help the networking of these good results become more effective. That was another way. And then also investing in the schools in the inner city. So it's been a joy for them, and
Do they have children or not?
they have a family, and often parents love to have their family members participate.
I always wonder about when you give somebody a house, and I'm not saying that you gave it to them because apparently they did something financially to purchase the house from them, but sometimes, you know, they give people a big house or something, and then they can't afford to pay the taxes, and they end up losing the house.
Yeah. Well, this is much more involved than I just laid out for you both.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm
But the
sure
point
the
is,
T's were crossed and the I's dotted.
right, where is the need? What can we do? And today, some are helping the city address violent crime, affordable housing, job training, and jobs. And there's a great work going on that we could spend a lot of time discussing if it was important for you now. But we're excited to see change in the inner city. We've got to bring violent crime down, which means we've got to find new ways to think about crusty, long-term, tragic circumstances.
A $1,000,000 question.
Yeah.
I used to be right in the middle of that violent crime at Mount Sinai on Friday and payday. All kinds of gunshots, stabbings. I mean, it is a big question because I got in trouble one time on a show because I made a comment about saying that, you know, if kids in the inner city worked and did volunteer work or whatever, if they couldn't get a job, that then they would get a ticket at the end of the summer, and maybe it would be for a car or something, a contest, so that somebody who did a lot would win a car or something. And someone called me up and read me the riot act about saying that, because they said that, you know, that's not going to solve problems. I said, well, I'm just trying to think of ways to make them do volunteer work or to make them do things to keep them busy, because when they're not, they get in serious trouble.
Yeah. Well, today there's a movement not only with civic leaders in the city, business leaders, educators, and the church community to create an alliance, if you will, for forward progress. It's called Together Chicago, and it's going to, we all hope, make a meaningful difference and bring health, sanity, and well-being back to some very difficult communities, troubled
Well, if
communities.
you can bring help, that's going to be a big thing, because I've just had some horrific experiences with healthcare in America, which we will do a show on in the future. You'll be very interested to hear what goes on, and it's not good. But I'll tell you, we did give very good services at Mount Sinai to the poor, and it always amazed me when you hear that the poor don't get care, because we had, I think, 11 floors there, and 6 of them at least were charity floors. So when they say that they don't take care of poor people, I wondered who I was taking care of those years, because we had all kinds of patients, and they weren't paying, they didn't have money. Some of them dropped their children off there. One boy hurt his arm in a washing machine. He was there for 5 years in the pediatric unit, yeah.
My goodness.
And nobody was paying for that except, you know, the
Right.
government. But, so, you know, it's an interesting issue, because I always hear how poor people don't get taken care of, and they did, in the emergency room, in the clinics, and on the charity floor. So they do get care. Matter of fact, there's laws that prevent you from preventing them from care.
Right.
You can't turn them away, so
Right.
that doesn't exist. Okay, but now to Tiger 21 again.
All right.
So is there anything that you get together and do like as a group other than looking at the investments?
Oh, yes,
Yeah.
yes. We have a social aspect. We want to include the wives. We want to include the adult children, because the idea is to grow. And so from a social aspect, one of our members invited us to his ranch in last summer. So Tiger 21 Chicago went west with spurs and cowboy hat and
How
other
far west?
south of Jackson Hole.
Oh,
So it's a beautiful part of our country, and that was a great deal of fun.
so how many people are, we talk about the age group, and then how many are single, how many are married?
Let's see.
We
So
didn't talk about age group, at least.
yes, in our
Oh, maybe I missed it.
Yeah.
So in our network, and we have 600 members in our network in 28 cities across the U.S. and Canada, in London, and soon in Hong Kong, Singapore, and Zurich. And the age range within the network is 29 to 84. And in Chicago, it's about 44 to 68 or 70. Yeah. And we get together for a Christmas party every year. We have opportunities to visit the members in their, and sometimes we'll meet in their homes. So we have a variety of opportunities. Sometimes we'll travel as a group to join another city and their members. So we all flew down to Dallas and they flew up here, and to learn from one another, to enjoy one another, and to think together how we can change things.
So how many are single and how many are married, the percentages?
Okay, so let me just think very quickly. I would say a third are single, 2/3 married, yeah.
And do the spouses come to the meetings too? or
The
not to the meetings?
The spouses will come after the meetings. If a particular member is doing his or her portfolio defense, or estate planning defense, or philanthropy defense and so on, they certainly are welcome to join in and participate. And otherwise, it would be for a social event.
So you're looking for members that if people were interested in joining, they have to qualify though.
They do. They do.
So how do they qualify?
So our members, it's about bringing peers together. And so I'm looking for two general criteria. One is they need to meet a minimum investable net worth threshold, and then they need to have the right mindset. And the mindset is simply they must be willing to come to teach and to learn. And what that usually suggests is it doesn't matter how much wealth you have at the end of the day. What matters is how you show up. Are you bringing your life lessons? Are you bringing the attitude that you're going to make this experience not only meaningful for yourself, but meaningful for everybody in the room? And so we end up thinking together, we create bonds of friendship and trust and help each other in really very meaningful ways.
Now, does everyone get to go to any meeting they want anywhere else, like C200, Committee of 200? And, I mean, if you're in another town, can you go to a Tiger meeting there?
Yes, you can.
Okay.
Which is different than Young Presidents Organization or Vistage or World Presidents Organization. So we need to tell the chairs in those respective cities that a member is interested in joining, but the local members have the final vote on whether they want for a particular segment or meeting to have visitors.
Oh, so you can't just show up?
You can't just show up, no.
Okay.
But for the most part, it works. and you
Okay,
can do
so
it.
we only have 5 minutes left. So what
Okay.
would you like to tell people that I have not asked you?
What we do in Tiger is we not only focus on very concrete things that are of value for smarter investing, more thoughtful estate plans, more effective philanthropy. But as I build this culture in Chicago, I'm keen to help each member think about something that's very difficult to come by in our culture today, and that is what it means to be a true friend. That's true wealth for some, and it's very difficult because it assumes that we want to be a good friend in order to have a good friend, that we can enter into what makes sense, and we can speak truthfully, and we can speak caringly, and we can speak thoughtfully
Confidentially.
and confidentially. And there are very few communities where this can happen. I can assure you that everyone who's a member of our group is not going to have the conversations we have with their fraternity brothers, their fellow members at their golf club, their synagogue, their church, or other group.
You know, I know we probably only have a minute or two left, but I never did ask you about that Bitcoin or whatever it is. Can you do a 1-minute thing on that?
Well, sure, Karen. You asked me earlier about, we're talking about speakers, right? And so I bring in speakers every month. And I take the pulse of the members in order to find out what's relevant, what's pressing now, what should we think about. So when the refugee crisis in Syria was going on, we focused on what those refugees were going through and what they needed. Last month, we focused on this technological revolution that's happening with Bitcoin and blockchain. And next month, we'll be focusing on the human genome and what's happening in medicine. And of course, Bitcoin, as we discussed a minute ago, is going through wild volatility right now.
What is it? I don't even know what it is.
It's digital currency.
Oh.
All right.
Okay.
So, or a token. Some like to say digital token. So I brought in 3 leading lights in the blockchain world and Bitcoin world to help us with an insight on how so many people could care so much to drive up value that's not backed, the exchange value, for a token or currency that's not backed by any government. It was one of the best sessions we've had. And the blockchain is the technology that makes this all possible, and it's going to change the world. Blockchain technology is today where the internet was in the early 90s. For those who are curious, I encourage you all to go on the web and take a closer look.
Okay. How can people contact you?
You can find me at,
Do you have a website?
we do.
Okay.
It's www.tiger21.com, and my email is rick.herrig, H-A-R-I-G, at tiger21.com.
Okay, so that should be pretty easy to find. So, Dr. Meyer, thank you for joining us.
Oh, you're welcome.
You had some interesting questions, too. If you're interested in this book, he says, Think Bigger, Winning Strategies, Successful Entrepreneurs, and some of them are members of the Tiger 21. So thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure.
I'm sure we'll probably have you back to explain the rest of this to us, because I don't know what you're talking about with some of it. Okay, thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next time. I'm Karen Gibson. Thank you.